The frigid air of Eagle Creek bit Elias's face as he adjusted the wood in the small fire. The scent of pine and smoke was the only comfort amidst the oppressive silence of the Alaskan winter. For 10 years, he had settled here, a solitary fur trader who dreamed of a less empty life. The promise of a bride coming from the south was the only beacon in his monotonous routine. He had exchanged letters with a marriage agency for years, dreaming of the companion who would give meaning to his days. The last letter informed him that she would arrive on the next canoe before the river froze completely. The canoe did arrive, the muffled sound of paddles breaking the thin ice at the shore. Elias felt a tightening in his chest, the mix of nervousness and anticipation consuming him. He had imagined a small, delicate woman with the startled eyes and pale face of the South. But the reality that disembarked on the shore was something else. The figure who stepped onto solid ground was imposing, an Inuit woman nearly 2 meters tall, with broad shoulders and a silent strength that seemed to rival the landscape itself. Her features were firm, her eyes dark and deep, observing the new environment with a calm Elias had never seen. She wore a caribou skin anorak and caribou boots, perfectly adapted to the cold that seemed to defy Elias's existence. The canoeist, a man of few words, simply pointed to her and the small chest she carried. "Your bride, Mr. Elias. Her name is Anniq." Elias's heart sank. The promise of a wife from the outside, from his people, crumbled before that unexpected and powerful presence. He had waited for a woman who would fit into his world, but what he received was a woman from a world he barely knew, a world that Alaska tried, without success, to claim. Anniq said not a word, just stared at him with an unreadable expression. The exchange of glances lasted only a few seconds, but for Elias it felt like an eternity. The silence of the night, once a refuge, now seemed like an abyss between them. If you are enjoying this story, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more tales like this one. The silence in the cabin was heavier than the ice outside. Anniq unpacked her chest with precise movements, taking out objects that seemed to belong to another life. An ulu blade, a piece of bone for polishing, ivory needles, and a small carved caribou doll. Elias watched her from the corner of his eye, uncomfortable and unable to start a conversation. He waited for an explanation, for an apology, but Anniq showed no embarrassment. She was the opposite of everything he had imagined. There was no delicacy, no fragility. There was strength and a self-sufficiency that made him feel small and unnecessary. The first night was a silent torture. They slept on opposite sides of the cabin, an invisible barrier of misunderstandings and prejudices rising between them. Elias wondered if the agency had made a mistake. How could they have sent an Inuit woman, one who seemed more a hunter than a homemaker? The next morning, Anniq was the first to get up. She left the cabin, and Elias followed cautiously. She did not go to the river, nor to the forest. Instead, she inspected the cabin, the roof, the wooden walls, the fresh air, and touched pieces of snow with her fingers, as if she were mapping the territory with her own body. The morning light revealed that Elias's cabin, though sturdy, was in poor condition. The roof leaked in several places, and the structure creaked in the wind. Anniq, with her life experience, seemed to notice every flaw. She went back inside and faced him, her eyes questioning his ability to take care of himself. Elias felt judged, his insecurity turning into frustration. "What are you doing?" he finally asked, his voice hoarse from disuse. Anniq did not respond with words, but simply held out a piece of caribou skin she had taken from her chest. The fabric was soft and perfectly cured. She pointed to the crack in the wall, and then to the roof. It was an offer of help, an offer that humiliated and challenged him at the same time. He had to choose between pride and pragmatism. That was the first of many silent challenges. Their coexistence was a strange and clumsy dance, marked by gestures and glances instead of words. Elias, accustomed to solitude, found it difficult to adjust to Anniq's presence. He tried to maintain his routine, but Anniq's shadow, always present and observant, made him feel like an intruder in his own home. She moved with a grace and a strength that contrasted with his own hesitation. Elias saw her fix a broken trap, using only a piece of bone and vegetable fiber. She mended a hole in his wool coat with a skill that impressed him, but also made him feel inadequate. The tension came to a head during a blizzard. The snow fell in dense, heavy flakes, and visibility was almost nil. Elias had promised a neighboring prospector, a man named Jed, that he would deliver a supply of firewood. Jed was sick and needed Elias, but the storm was a dangerous obstacle. Elias, stubborn, prepared to go, determined to keep his word. Anniq watched him, her dark eyes reflecting the flickering light of the lantern. She did not stop him with words, but with a wave of her hand, she pointed to the blizzard and shook her head. "I have to go, Anniq. Jed needs me," Elias said, his voice tense. "If I don't go, he might not make it through the night." Anniq approached him, her imposing height dominating the small space. She took his hand, and Elias noticed the strength in her fingers. She drew on the floor the silhouette of the mountain, the curve of the river, and the path he would take. Then she drew a bear, a wolf, and the symbol of the blizzard, indicating the dangers he would face. She knew the trail would be covered, the landmarks lost. She was showing him the danger of his arrogance. She knelt and took a small map from her chest with the landmarks he used. She then turned it upside down. The landscape he knew was not hers. That night, Elias did not go. He sat in silence, watching the snow fall, and for the first time, he admitted he did not know everything. The vulnerability of his own inexperience hit him like a blow. He and Anniq were caught in the same storm, and perhaps for the first time, her presence was not a threat, but the only hope for survival. Weeks turned into months, and the harshness of winter intensified their mutual dependence, transforming the initial distrust into a strange and silent partnership. Anniq proved to be a skilled hunter and tracker. While Elias struggled to find traps buried under the snow, Anniq located them with impressive precision, using her keen sight and her deep knowledge of the terrain. She taught him to read the snow, to listen to the silence, to understand the movement of prey. One afternoon, Elias found her fixing his sled, broken from a fall. She had disassembled the structure, cleaned the wood, and was tying it with leather strips she had prepared herself. The work was meticulous and perfect. Elias approached, and Anniq did not lift her head. That's good work," he said, his voice a little softer than usual. Anniq stopped working, looked at him, and for the first time an almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. It was a tired but genuine smile. The blizzard continued for 3 days and 3 nights, and the river ice became thick, closing the path to any external help. The food, which once seemed sufficient, began to dangerously dwindle. Anniq, noticing Elias's concern, decided to act. She said nothing, just grabbed her spear and left the cabin, disappearing into the whiteness of the storm. Elias was distraught. What was she doing? Where had she gone? Hours passed, and concern turned into despair. What would happen if she didn't come back? When the cabin door opened, a cold wind blew in, and Anniq entered, dragging a young moose. She was exhausted, her face red and covered in ice, but her eyes shone with the satisfaction of a successful hunter. She had tracked and hunted the animal alone, ensuring their survival for weeks. Elias, in shock, helped her drag the animal inside. You saved us," he whispered. Anniq just shook her head, as if to say it was what was expected of her. That moment of pure and unquestionable gratitude broke the last barrier between them. Elias realized that Anniq's strength was not a threat, but a gift. He no longer saw her as the wrong bride, but as his equal, his partner, the woman Alaska had sent him to teach him how to survive. If you are enjoying this story, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more tales like this one. With the shortage resolved, the atmosphere in the cabin changed dramatically. Elias's gratitude and Anniq's display of confidence allowed conversation, once non-existent, to begin to flow, albeit hesitantly. Anniq began to speak, first in short words, then in longer sentences. She told him about her village, about life in a community where cooperation was the only form of survival. Elias listened, fascinated, about the Inuit tradition, the legends passed down from generation to generation, the respect for the land and the animals. Elias, in turn, told her about his life in the south, the store he and his family lost to the economic crisis, the dream of starting a new life in Alaska, the loneliness that had consumed him. They opened up to each other, revealing their vulnerabilities and fears. Little by little, the barrier of prejudice and misunderstanding began to crumble, giving way to mutual understanding. Anniq taught him how to clean and cure leather, a process she performed with impressive mastery. They worked side by side in the cabin, she mending the roof with moose hides and he reinforcing the wooden structure. The synchrony was remarkable, a dance of work and mutual respect. Elias began to see the world through Anniq's eyes, the beauty of the snow, the silence that once frightened him, now comforted him. One afternoon, as the storm subsided, Elias saw her sitting, sewing a new skin for her anorak. He approached, and she handed him a piece of otter skin, soft and perfectly worked. "For you," she said, her voice soft and velvety. "Your coats don't protect you enough from the cold." Elias took the skin, feeling the delicacy of the touch. He was used to hunting, to trading, to surviving on his own, but he was not used to being cared for. Anniq's gesture struck him in an unexpected and profound way. He saw in her not only the strength of the hunter, but the delicacy of the artisan, the care of a partner. Spring brought the promise of new life. The river began to thaw, the sounds of birds returned to echo in the forest, and the white, monotonous landscape gave way to shades of green and brown. Elias and Anniq's routine adapted to the new climate. They now worked together, Elias taking care of the traps, and Anniq tracking and hunting. The partnership was perfect, based on a deep respect for each other's skills. One morning, while fishing in the river, Elias noticed a small camp a few kilometers downstream. It was Jed and his son on their first fishing trip of the season. Their presence, however, brought back the reality of the outside world, a world that had been suspended during the winter. Jed, a rough but good-hearted man, was surprised to see Anniq beside Elias. His eyes went from Anniq to Elias and back, a mixture of curiosity and surprise. "Is that your bride, Elias?" he asked, his voice uncertain. Elias felt the tension return. He knew Jed was not a man of prejudice, but the world outside was. He saw Jed's look at Anniq, the way he observed her strength, her darker skin, and wondered what was going through his friend's mind. "This is Anniq," Elias replied, his voice firm and protective. "She is my wife." He used the word wife for the first time, not as a formality, but as a declaration of belonging. Anniq remained silent, but Elias could feel her presence, her silent support. The conversation continued, and Anniq, with her unwavering calm, began to show Jed the best bait for the season's fish. She moved with confidence, and the experience she conveyed disarmed any doubt Jed might have had. Jed was surprised by her calm and skill. He saw that she was a hunter, not a wrong bride. He was not the only one who questioned her origin, but Elias was confident. Elias's look at Anniq was different, There was no more tension, only admiration. He saw her as a strong, intelligent woman, and he loved her. The news of Elias and Anniq's marriage spread like wildfire through the small community. It wasn't long before neighbors began to visit the cabin, some out of curiosity, others out of genuine friendship. Most were impressed by Anniq's strength and skill, but there were always those who whispered, who questioned the marriage. They saw Elias as a man who had married a savage, someone of another race. The words hurt, but Elias did not let them affect him. He had found in Anniq something he never imagined he would have: a partner, a companion, a woman who loved him. He didn't care what others thought. He knew what he had. Anniq, in turn, did not care about the whispers. She was immune to the empty words of small-minded people. The greatest proof of Elias's love came when one of the prospectors, a rude and drunk man named Roy, approached the cabin and began to insult Anniq. He called her a tribal woman and insulted her. Elias, without hesitation, got up and confronted Roy. He was not a man of a fight, but he was defending his wife. "Roy, get off my property," Elias said, his voice firm and full of authority. "She is my wife, and I will not allow you to insult her." Roy laughed, but Elias did not hesitate. He faced him, and Roy, surprised by Elias's strength, backed away. The confrontation made it clear to everyone that Elias had chosen Anniq, and he was ready to defend her. The incident reinforced the love between them. Elias finally understood that what he felt for Anniq was something deeper than society's prejudice. He loved her, not because she was the wrong bride, but because she was the woman he needed to survive and be happy in Alaska. If you are enjoying this story, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more tales like this one. Summer brought the opportunity for Elias to redeem himself in a way he never would have imagined. A strong and unexpected river current swept away Jed's boat, which carried him to a dangerous waterfall. Jed, a skilled swimmer, managed to grab onto a log, but was trapped and had a broken ankle. The location was difficult to access, and help was unlikely. Elias, without hesitation, took his canoe and went towards Jed. He remembered Anniq's lessons about the currents and dangers of the river. When Elias arrived at the location, Anniq was already there, preparing to swim and go towards Jed. She moved with the agility of a fish, but Elias knew the river was dangerous. "Anniq, don't go," he said, his voice full of fear. "It's too dangerous. I'll go." Anniq, however, did not listen to him. She was already in the water, swimming with a strength and grace that Elias had never seen. She reached Jed, and with Elias's help, managed to get him out of the river. The scene was almost surreal. Elias, a man who for his whole life was his own savior, was now saving a friend's life, with the help of his wife, the woman he had judged. Anniq, in turn, was happy to have saved a life. She had been the hero, the savior. Back at Elias's cabin, Jed, with his ankle bandaged, turned to Anniq and with eyes full of gratitude said, "Anniq, you saved my life. You are the strongest woman I have ever known." Anniq just smiled and shook her head, but Elias knew what that meant. He was no longer the only one to see his wife's strength and beauty. Jed had been the first to surrender to Anniq's charm, and Elias was happy. He knew that prejudice would be difficult to overcome, but he was ready to face it. He had Anniq by his side, and that was all that mattered. Autumn arrived, and with it the preparation for winter. Elias and Anniq now worked together as a couple. They built a new annex to the cabin, a larger and safer structure. Anniq showed Elias how to build a more resistant wooden structure. He learned from her, and she from him. They were a team, a force. One night, Elias saw her sitting, sewing a bearskin blanket. He approached, and Anniq invited him to sit. They talked about winter, about the changes that Alaska brought to their lives, about the love they felt. Elias remembered the day she arrived, his despair, his prejudice. He felt ashamed, But Anniq reassured him. "I understand," she said, her voice soft. "We are different, Elias, but that doesn't mean we can't love each other." Elias hugged her, feeling the warmth of her body. He loved Anniq, and he was grateful for her having come into his life. She taught him to love himself, to love life. The story of Elias and Anniq was not just a love story, it was a story of overcoming, of personal growth. They had overcome prejudice, loneliness, and had found love in an unexpected place. Winter came, but the cabin was no longer a lonely place. The warmth of the fireplace, the smell of fresh food, the sound of Anniq's voice, all of this had transformed the cabin into a home. Elias sat next to Anniq, looking at the falling snow. He felt at peace, happy, and he knew that life, which had seemed so lonely and meaningless, now had a purpose. He had Anniq, and she had him. They were home. Time passed, and the story of Elias and Anniq became a legend in the small community. They became a couple, a symbol of love and overcoming. Elias and Anniq had a daughter, little Anniqswak, who had her mother's dark eyes and her father's smile. She was the living proof that their love was real and that they had built a family. Elias and Anniq continued to live their lives, working together, overcoming challenges. They became a pillar of the community, helping neighbors, sharing their wisdom. Anniq became the community's healer, using her knowledge of herbs and plants to cure illnesses. Elias became the counselor, using his life experience to help the young people. One night, while looking at the aurora borealis, Elias turned to Anniq and said, "You are the strongest woman I have ever known, Anniq, and I am grateful for you having come into my life." Anniq smiled, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. "I am grateful for having found you, Elias. You taught me to love, to trust, to be happy." The end of the story was not just the end of a book, it was the beginning of a new life. Elias and Anniq had overcome prejudice, loneliness, and had found love. They were the living proof that love has no borders, no prejudice, no color. They were the proof that life, no matter how difficult it is, always offers a chance for a new beginning. They were the proof that life can be transformed, that love can be found in an unexpected place. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this story. If you'd like to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications.